This week on Carlie's Couch, we're talking about how to deal with your thoughts and relationships with others whenever you are in your healing journey.
Buenos dias. Welcome to Carlie's Couch.
Hey, y'all. How y'all feeling today? How y'all doing? Happy Monday, because we know y'all tuning in on a Monday.
Yeah, what better way to get your week started than with podcasts? I have a few podcasts where I always am like checking every other day to see like if something new's dropping on Good and Well, that they have a schedule. But we appreciate everybody who listens and who keeps up with the episodes. Let us know what your favorite episode has been recently. That's always good to know as we prepare new episodes for you. And this week we got a comment from a listener which sparked this episode. So we love the feedback. We love to know that you're thinking about us when you see other things that we can talk about.
Yeah, and I mean, it's great because, we're both brilliant, obviously, but sometimes it's like hard, like, I don't really feel like talking about nothing today. So we do appreciate the questions. Also, someone this week told me that he fell asleep listening to our podcast. And I was like, oh, I see you, like, getting into your cerebral and your subconscious.
That was a compliment?
He was like, it was so peaceful. He was like, I was learning and stuff. And
that don't sound cool to me. Like, shout out falling asleep on me.
Just at the end. Well, if you listen to it at the end of the night. But I remember Nipsey used to talk about he would fall asleep to podcasts and things because supposedly whenever you're sleeping and you're listening to stuff, your brain is still absorbing everything. So
yeah, it's actually not letting you get good sleep, but we'll talk about that another day.
For sure. But shout out to Hi Ashley A for hitting us and giving us this week's topic. So she sent us a reel on Instagram about interacting with others whenever you're in the midst of your healing journey. And then she said, pardon if y'all have touched on this, but could be a good subject to dive into. Changes either of you have made and the impact it had on how you view things, but also having the patience to know your journey isn't everyone else's. And the reel was about part of healing being knowing that you can't determine if or when other people in your life will change. So, dun 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 dun.
So you're changing, you're healing, you feel like you're doing the work. And I say feel like because to me, that's part of the caveat of the conversation. But you feel like you're changing and that there's folks around you who aren't necessarily. How do you deal with that? That's what we're addressing, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it struck true to me because on my own journey, I've noticed my different relationships in the different stages of my healing journey, which I'm still very much in the midst of. I don't really think it ever ends. I think your bounce back time just gets better. But the first thing that really came to mind for me when I was thinking about, my attachment to others or being able to determine if and when they'll change was my relationship with my mom. And that's really what got me, kind of started oh man, that's a good topic because nobody really ever talks about when you're in the midst of healing, how your relationships start to change and how you start to change in your relationships and what happens in those.
Mm-hmm. And what are some ways that your relationships start to change?
I feel like you start to notice more, so much like we talk about if you talk about something you start to see it more often. If you start to learn about toxic positivity, all of a sudden you're gonna start seeing it everywhere. If you start to learn about all my trauma, I think that's how we also get buzzwords in this industry. People latch onto something and then it just becomes a thing that you start to see everywhere. So that's one of them is you start to notice it probably more in other people, and you could start to get judgy of them.
Notice what the issues that
issues
you're dealing with?
Yeah. That's the one thing
which is interesting because when you're going through those things, why is it so hard to have the same kind of empathy or understanding of somebody dealing with those same types of issues? I guess because now it's one of the biggest things is that you may feel like these people owe you better communication. They owe you healing, especially if we're talking about family, like you mentioned that, your family member, and that's kind of valid for a parent to feel like they owe you a certain level of love, care, respect, etc. A close friend, somebody you're in a relationship with, etc. I think a lot of times that feeling of I'm the only one doing this, they're not doing that, kind of comes from this idea that, okay, I'm going through this journey and why aren't they? But at the end of the day, your healing journey isn't about other people. And so to me, that just really signifies that there's still more healing that you have to do. Obviously, like you said, you're never done. But now what you kind of still have to heal is healing the letting go and healing listening to yourself and having the insight of what decisions are you going to make about your life and what you do and who you interact with and who you do things with that's in accordance with what you're learning about your healing. And so I think, I don't know if this is not too cut and dry, but I feel that a lot of times what's happening is while we are learning about ourselves and learning about, wow, why am I like this? Or why am I reacting a certain way to other people and what they're doing? What we're now struggling with is actually changing the actions and changing the actual relationships, which may not need to exist anymore or definitely not in the same way. And so we spend that time still trying to control an outcome and still trying to control other people, which is a dangerous thing as well. And sorry, I'm like talking, but recently I was just reading, I listened to a podcast the other day about narcissistic relationships, but then in listening to it, I'm like, why do we always like read about or hear about narcissistic people and them trying to manipulate you and blah, blah, blah. But you're reading these articles and you're listening to these things because low-key you want to kind of control how that person acts with you. You wish they did something different. You wish they were listening to you. You wish blah, 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 blah. And I looked it up and I started doing research. And there's two different types of narcissism. And one of them is being that victim and being that person who is like, you're still there and you're hoping that things are different, or you turn the spotlight and things back on you because, well, but why are you doing this to me and blah, blah, blah. And so that's still showcasing and putting a spotlight on you as things you still need to figure out and heal if you're not okay with letting people be where they are in the first place.
That's the long and the short of it. And I'm glad you talked about the victim mentality, because that's a big thing. Like, a lot of people gain their identity in that, and how, people have hurt you and wronged you, which may be very valid. I'm not saying that it's not and that there's not things to heal, but when you let that become your identity, you can fall into the narcissism of it. But the biggest takeaway from what you just said was that the only thing we really can control is our actions in relationships. And so maybe something to think about on your healing journey, if you find yourself too preoccupied with other people and what they're doing and what they're not doing and how they're not on your level and reading the books and listening to the podcast, girl, maybe it's right here. No, it's all right. I just dropped a piece of jewelry. But I figured it out. But maybe anytime you find yourself focusing externally, just turn that back to you. All that love, all that attention, all that energy. And I have a big example of it, like with my mom. So me and my mom's relationship has healed a bunch. And a lot of it she credits, so it's not even me tooting my own horn, but my mom credits it to my healing journey. Because I learned that, I need better boundaries in my relationships. I instituted them with her. At first, she bucked back. Didn't like it. We didn't talk for a few months. And then she got it together and we figured it out, and we started doing these things. But if I had been so hung up on her not respecting my boundaries and not doing this and not doing that, we wouldn't be where we are today. And so although healing does change relationships, people can either get with it or get gone. And that, just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, one of the most important things that I've learned over time is that, based off of what you're saying about not being able to control other people, you have to let other people meet you where you are in a healthy place. So if you're truly focused on you being in a healthy place, that might mean what you're saying about letting this person go or not responding to them or setting your boundaries essentially for what makes the most sense for you. In that case, a person is either going to stay where they are, which is fine. Why would you want to be like reversed back into an unhealthy space just to keep a relationship? They're either going to stay where they are or they are going to start to notice and do the work, because if that relationship is important to them as well, then they will start to do some kind of efforts. And you'll never see other people put in effort or grow, I guess, as relates to your particular circumstance with that person, right? Like, you don't know what else they got to heal from and what's going on with their life a lot of times. But if you don't leave that space, then like there's nowhere for them to go. And so instead of, this goes with like in a broader space, but like instead of like texting this person like, hey, you're not doing this, or can you do this, or blah, 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 like just stop talking to them. Like, move on. You have to do what's best for you. If you're healing, you're doing what's best for you. And then if that person like, Dad, I do kind of miss this person, and then they reach out to you, then you can go from there. But like, that's so much extra weight on your shoulders. And it's over responsible of you to be trying to push that on other people. I for sure have a lot of examples and experience of trying to get other people to change, and like, you know, it's like you're trying to get them to see something. Have you ever, you probably have, Carlie, but have you ever been like looking up something, but like for somebody else? Like,
for sure.
You're like, dang, like, all right, how to better like forgive or apologize or whatever it might be, right? And it's like you trying to look up stuff like, man, how can they figure this out? And it's like you want to send them stuff or listen to this podcast or do that. And it's like that falls on deaf ears because they're not looking for that unless they ask you. And so it's like, why do all that when you can stop? And this is what I kind of start doing now is like I just stop. A, think about like, why am I looking at this? And then B, think about what's the reality of the situation right now with our relationship with whoever this person is. And C, like, okay, what do I need to be doing? And like, let them live their life type thing. Yeah, and like, it'll come around when it needs to come around. Like, it's just so much better to just like not do that extra work for no reason.
Agreed. And I'm saying all this like being pretty deep into my healing journey. I've been learning how to love myself for 10 years, like dedicated, like it was actually a goal of mine. And so it might not be easy in the beginning to notice when you're doing these things, but anytime you catch yourself being more externally focused, that's a sign to tune back into yourself. Anytime that you're trying to change somebody, tune it back into yourself. And also notice when that happens, because part of your healing might be unlearning the identity that you're supposed to be the person saving everybody. Like being over responsible in any capacity for other people, their thoughts, their actions, their emotions, whatever, is a trauma response. And I noticed that in myself. And so that's like a big, big, big healing space. And so maybe these things that you're noticing, how you're viewing other people or you get caught up in relationships, are just signifiers of other things for you to heal. Like things come up whenever you're ready to address them. And so as they come up along your healing journey, as you start to notice, you know, those are things you can add to your therapy list, or you can add to look up for yourself, or to work on, or to set better boundaries for.
Mm-hmm. And then most of the things we are worried about with other people are projections from ourselves too. So another thing I'll do is if I'm thinking about like what somebody else is doing and like too worried about other people's business, is like think about like, all right, where am I at with this? Even like recently, like if I'm disappointed in somebody, or like they said they were gonna do something, they didn't do it, or you know what I wish they would do or something like that. I'm like, man, people are so disappointing. And then I always like kind of stop and think about, like, man, I disappoint a lot of people too. Like, and I can think of like straight examples. I'm like, I don't always do everything I say I'm going to do either. Right. And so I try to like have empathy in that way. And by just quickly doing that, I now have kind of de-escalated my like feeling disappointed in somebody else, and just realizing like real world, like if this is not something that's like life or death, or, you know, it might be serious, whatever you're talking about. But if it's not really, really that deep put in perspective, it's like, you know what? People mess up, and I'm gonna let them mess up on their own without feeling like I have to do something about that. And now what do I need to do moving forward in this situation? If somebody is showing you, hey, I'm not changing a thing, or if they're showing you, hey, this trauma or this whatever is still a big part of my life, and I'm not, haven't figured it out yet, or if they're showing you like I'm not gonna meet you where you are, and you have to be like, okay, like, what do you need to do
for yourself? Absolutely. And I think, like I said, I think it's a lot easier to say than to do. And this is from a lot of practice, but also noticing when you think you know better than somebody else what they need to do for their life, check yourself, because you can't know all the intricacies and nuances of what it takes to be somebody else. No matter how much you love them, no matter how close you are to them, your partner, your mom, your best friend, whoever, you don't always know what's best for people. And when you start to do that, like that actually pushes people away, when you always feel like you know what's better for them. And I think that that's like this self-righteous side of healing that not a lot of people talk about. Like we can start to be real judgy, start to feel like we know better, or, you know, since we're putting in the work, can start to look at others. And that's another sign, like, stop looking around and judging other people. There's a lot of stuff you projecting and need to work on for yourself. Yeah,
it can get real self-righteous real quick. And like often I will be like on Twitter, and like, you know how you see somebody, you know, they're tweeting something and you're like, all right, like you don't really do that yourself. Or just when people are like say something like love holy or blah blah, like just talking in a certain way, and you'd be like, all right. But then it's like I'm judging them, being judgy of whatever, and it's just like keep scrolling, like just don't have the space for that right now. But when you are kind of on that journey of trying to be more aware of yourself and all those things, you might be trying to help other people and trying to put things in front of their face. You also might start to feel like, well, if I did it, like, why can't they do it? But remember that everybody's timing is so different. And if it took me 30 something years to figure something out or even be aware of a thing and then break it down, like, who knows what the timing might be for somebody else. And a lot of times, especially if we're talking about like with relationships, whether friendly or romantic, maybe things can be so much better if there is a space until they get to that point. And maybe in the future, something comes back around or you have a better relationship, a better friendship or whatever, because you're not looking at them in kind of a judgmental way or like putting pressure on them to do a certain thing. Just like with kind of religion too. I always wonder, like, these folks who like stand on the corner with their signs and stuff, like, who do you think you're converting with like that type of tactic? Whereas why not like live the actual life of a healed person or live the life of whatever religion or whatever and let people see like, oh, what are you doing over there? Like, what's going on with you? And then use that time to talk about yourself, what you're doing, what you're learning, and let yourself just be an example for other folks. I think if you're approaching it differently, then to me, again, that's just a sign that now it's like, wait, what do I need to heal now if I'm being judgy or self-righteous or worried too much about other people?
And I think that those can come from a good place, like the idea that you want to help people, you really love them, your parents, your sister, your brother, whoever, like your cousin, you really love them and you want them to be able to do better or choose better for themselves. But one of the biggest revelations I've ever had in my whole life is like, changing myself and living by example is the best way to help other people. Like, I'm actually not here to technically help anybody else. I'm here to figure out my life. And in doing so, people see you, they get motivated. Like, man, I used to know Carlie back in the day. Like, damn, she did a whole 180. Like, look at this. This is amazing. And start inspiring people through the life that you live and the work that you do and the words that you speak. Like, you being yourself and working to heal yourself and figure yourself out and your purpose, like, that's the whole goal of this. And so when you're focused there, that's when you're actually able to make the biggest impact. So like I said, even if it's motivated in the right way, like, you're still focused on the wrong thing.
I think another point to this as well, when it comes to your healing journey, I do this so often where it's like while you're talking, something hit me and now I'm losing track of what I was thinking. So I'm probably going to have to come back to it.
Okay. I'll go to my last one. So I actually had a conversation the other day. Someone sent me a TikTok and it was talking about how nobody talks about, and except us, because we're talking about it right now. Nobody talks about the loneliness and the disconnection that come whenever you really start doing the inner work. I think inner work is hard sometimes because when you do outer work, people can see it like, dang, girl, your body looking good. But when you're doing that inner work, like, you don't really get all those accolades. Nobody can see that you've healed, your generational trauma and that you've been working on all this stuff necessarily. And how in that, whenever you do start to heal yourself and really focus on yourself and set boundaries and start to change your relationships, it can be a lonely journey at times because maybe people aren't working on the exact same things, or maybe they haven't been there, or you're the first one doing it. And so you can start to feel disconnected from people who you've been close to like your whole life. Like, maybe you can't talk to them about the same things and it just starts to get tough. But I think there's a lot of beauty in getting to know yourself on that deeper level. And then knowing that as long as you're doing the work, that, the right people will come into your life, and the relationships that need to grow will grow. The ones that need to fall away will fall away. And that everything is aligned.
Do you agree with that, though, that the healing journey is lonely? Or is that your experience?
It can be lonely. It doesn't have to be, but I think some parts of it are. I have been lonely on it. We talked about in a different facet, but like the entrepreneurship journey, like in the beginning can be a little lonely too. Like, I think anytime.
Is that a healing journey, though?
No, I said in a different facet. I was comparing.
Okay.
Saying that, like, anytime you're starting to do something that maybe people around you haven't done, it could be lonely. So for example, I think about like maybe some of my homies back in Oklahoma who really haven't ever left, and like self-care and mindfulness and trauma work and all that stuff isn't an everyday topic, kind of like it is here in LA. And so they might feel more alone, not having community or people who are doing that. And so therefore it can feel lonely. And or whenever you start to do the work, you start to change, and maybe let's say the people around you aren't doing it, you can start to feel disconnected because maybe you don't do the stuff you used to do. Maybe you're not, going out every weekend, or maybe y'all aren't playing golf every weekend and doing these things because you're spending more time. So you can start to feel a disconnect with the person that you once thought you were, as that person fades away into like who you really are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in my experience, the disconnection part is understandable just because things shift with people in the relationships, which is kind of the basis of the question that this person was asking. But I don't necessarily agree with, for me, I guess, I don't think that it's lonely at all, because in my experience, any like aha moments, any self-awareness or whatever is always like an expansion into a different space where you do feel better. You feel more peace. You feel more excited. You're making different decisions, better decisions, hanging out with whoever else. To me, it doesn't necessarily feel lonely. I think that it's just a part of the journey that your relationships can change. And then sometimes it's not, maybe they change to where they don't disappear, but you are interacting with people a little bit differently in some cases. Or because you are not hanging out with certain people as much or whatever, your life feels better and it does feel more fruitful because that's the way that, or the direction that you need to go. So I would say, like, I wouldn't want to push anybody away from like therapy and doing things, or them thinking like, oh man, I'm gonna be lonely. Because I feel like instead of lonely, I would say it's uncomfortable. And the uncomfortable part is because healing means you have to spend time with yourself and you have to look at yourself. So there's a lot of discomfort sometimes with that. What you mentioned as far as like who you thought you were, who you are, coming to grips with your own issues, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe that can feel, bad or it's hard to kind of deal with. But in tackling that with doing things differently, I feel like it just opens up a whole new world that should hopefully feel more in tune with you. So I don't know. I feel like life has really gotten so much better with healing, because even with the healing, it's like, okay, I'm more like ready to hop into conflict and more ready to be honest, or more ready to have hard conversations or do whatever I need to do, because it just makes everything better, like very much more quickly than like trying to figure things out and worrying about people, etc. So I don't know. I think if you look at it kind of like a game after a while, knowing that you're going in a direction that's positive for you, then hopefully you are filling in those gaps of things that fall away with things that are more for you.
Yeah, it's absolutely a journey of making space and accepting greater things. Like, I didn't know life could feel this good, or that I could love myself this much, or have as fulfilling relationships, feel as seen, because you start to actually know who you are. And when you know who you are and you can share that with other people, like, it's so beautiful to feel seen and not feel like you have a mask on or nobody knows the real you. But I will say I definitely have felt lonely on my journey. But it's never been so bad that I've wanted to quit. And it's always gotten better. So if you are in the midst of your journey and going through all these struggles, it does get better. Just keep going on that.
Yeah, maybe a lot of that is the grief of having to make the decision of, putting boundaries in place with certain people, where you had a different thought of what that was going to turn out to be. So dealing with that. What I was going to say earlier, because I remembered it, was a big part of this, and a thing to remember is sometimes when it comes to the other folks around us and that we don't think they're doing as much as us, or not healing as much, or we can clearly, in air quotes, like we clearly see what your issue is, which sometimes, I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong, but you, like Carlie said, you don't know the whole story. But in those situations, to also keep in mind your perspective of what efforts are they doing, like making sure that when you're looking at folks, you are like noticing and thinking about and praising the things that they are doing that are a move in the right direction, or something that is maybe a small piece of their healing journey, or a big piece and you just might not even know. But yeah, like don't make sure you're not looking at people and keeping them in a place like where they are and you don't even really know the full story. If you're not actually having deep conversations with people or talking with them about particular things, then like honestly, you really don't even know what's going on at all. So that's something to be aware of too, in coming across self-righteous or judgy to other people. is like, yo, what are they doing well and great, and like give them their kudos and what they need for that.
Yeah, and that's so important. And earlier you mentioned empathy. My own healing journey and unlearning and relearning and all that has given me so much empathy and grace for other people, because girl, I need it too. Like, give me all the grace. I am erringly, beautifully human. And in that, it's helped me build so much more patience for other people. Because their version of doing the work, like Lexi said, you don't know actually what they're doing. So, like, give kudos to what it is, because they could be suffering from mental health things and their work might not look like yours. Like I said, the biggest example I have of this is like when my mom, like, her asking me for help or her sharing something, though seemingly small and not necessarily quote unquote monumental among a journey, is big for her. And shout out to her for being brave enough to share with me when I have been judgy in the past. So really looking at yourself first and then trying to carry that same feeling of what you would want others to feel for you whenever you're really struggling through something, I think would help improve all the really important relationships that you want to keep in your life, that are reciprocal as you're on your journey.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. And that is a really good story and example for you to be able to go back to think about how you doing what you need to do allow the space for somebody else to figure out how they can actually grow, as well as actually have a good relationship with you. So, I mean, all of this, I think, is about doing what's best for you. And worrying about somebody else is never going to be the best thing for you, unless we're talking about a dependent or something like that.
Yeah, and ending with a quote that I saw actually on Twitter. It's like, most people want to change the world, but nobody wants to change themselves. So as you're on this, make sure you always recenter, refocus on you, how you're feeling, you're setting your boundaries and living the things you need to do and knowing that your life will align around that. Mm-hmm. Exactly how you need it to.
Because if you're judging folks, you probably not all the way healed yourself. So you need to always try to catch yourself like, you know what do I need to figure out right now? Mm-hmm. That's all you can do is what do I need to focus on? So refocus on you.
Absolutely. Send us some stuff so we can have some shout outs for the end of the year. But we'll end with the question of the week. Lexi, what is an example of a perfect show to you? And if not perfect, close enough.
I really like Homeland as maybe a perfect show. I forgot how many seasons it has, but I just thought it was like really good, like season to season. Nice twists and turns. I love a little political suspense type thing. So that's the one I'm going to go with.
Nice. Mine is This Is Us. And I think it's just such a beautifully nuanced, complex written show where they address real life issues in a way that doesn't feel like they're forcing it down your throat or just trying to throw it out there to have it. But like, damn, like I kind of actually have seen it in my own family, or like, man, I felt like that before. And every episode I've like cried and laughed on. So
I've only seen a episode here and there, but it does seem like it's that type of show. Like it is really good.
And I don't know what it's called, but I also love when movies and shows like they start at an end point and then they like have a thread that goes throughout, like back how they got to it. They do that shit every episode, like going back in time, and you see like this crock pot and then it turns into this whole story, and then they like end the episode with the thing. You're like, oh wow, that's so cool. Like I love great writing that doesn't have a lot of holes, and they're able to do that.
Which is kind of reflective of what we're talking about today, where it's like, wherever you're at right now and how you're feeling or what you're seeing or your relationships, your job, whatever, it's like you can always kind of look back and figure out like, what was the journey? Like, how did we get here? And connecting all of those dots and understanding that everything is connected, and that from this point forward, you can make the decision on where things go next.
Yeah, so hit us at Carlie's Couch. Shout out to Ashley A. Thank you for the question. If y'all have questions, thoughts for episodes, things you want to hear us talk about, but also hit us and let us know what you're going to do this week, to improve your relationships with others, or things you've noticed on your own healing journey that have helped your relationships.
And you might need to apologize to somebody about, you know what, I feel like I've been hard on you. Because a lot of times, too, you'll notice, like, and this is a lot of times a woman type thing too, where it's like you kind of nag at somebody about something, in where it's like you want the best for them or you want them to see something so bad, but it really just makes a person feel like, I can never do enough, or you'll never be happy, or whatever, and that can discourage folks. So you may need to also take stock of somebody you may need to apologize to for kind of not giving them the space to like figure it out. Like a lot of times people heard you, they heard you, and they're not in the place. They don't care, or they are working on it, but like they don't want to do that shit with you. So you know, say what you need to say and let it go. It's not your responsibility to try to teach somebody and like make somebody get a thing. All right, we done because we gonna keep going.
That's it. Bye, y'all.
Peace.